Awesome, thank you. Good evening, everyone. We want to call to order the special meeting of the South Utica Lyndhurst Board of Education, our work session, today being Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. May we get a roll call, Mr. Hill?
Ms. Falkenberg?
Here.
Mrs. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. King?
Here.
Ms. Lee? Mrs. Shelby?
Here.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us online, hello, and in person. Thank you. And we can go right into the minutes. The minutes of the regular meeting for November 19th, 2024 will be approved as recorded or corrected. Furthermore, the reading of these minutes will be waived. May we get a motion to approve item 2.1?
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Shelby and Mrs. King. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, may we get a roll call, Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Shelby?
Aye.
Mrs. King?
Aye.
Ms. Falkenberg?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye. Item 3, discussion items, 3.1, buildings and grounds, master plan.
Yes. All right, good evening, Board of Education, all stakeholders watching online, thank you for joining us. Very excited about this first update for everybody. To get things started here, so this is our facilities update. I'm gonna speak a little bit at the beginning, and then I'm gonna turn it over to our Director of Business Affairs, Mr. Lee Fuller. To be completely transparent, Lee and I me being a rookie superintendent, Lee being a rookie to business affairs, as we started our status meetings in the summertime and into the early fall, I had a focus on a couple big key initiatives that I wanted to hit on, and those were brush performing arts and creating a space for our families and our growing preschool. And our preschool, hopefully that's good smiles on it.
It is.
Okay, good.
I told you Crystal had asked
Oh,
about
yeah,
this
yeah.
before.
So our preschool has quadrupled in size post-COVID, and we have the data to back that up. And then I was explaining these to Mr. Fuller, and he was smiling, saying, hey, that's all great. I have a laundry list of things that make the buildings run and are operable and everything else. So you're talking HVAC, you're talking roofing, you're talking everything in between, from concrete to compliance to parking lots to all of those things. And from there, we decided that we needed to build a master's facilities plan. And we have started that process. It has been a learning experience for the both of us. And for tonight, what we're gonna cover is what exactly is a facilities master's plan, why we need it, because we don't have one. The last one we could find and hunt down was from roughly 12 years ago-ish. How will we utilize the facilities master plan? How will we create it? We are currently using Amoresco, which we're gonna talk about, and the next step will then be community feedback and board input. And our district goals for a master facilities plan, as you can see, those are space for a preschool, the Brush Performing Arts Center, and a creation of a family welcome center. So with that being said, for the facilities master plan, what we're looking at, I'm gonna go over these first couple slides and turn it over to Lee. It's a strategic document that outlines a long-term vision, priorities, and actions needed to manage and improve a school district's physical assets. And this next sentence here, in my opinion, is the most important. It serves as a roadmap to guide decision-making over 5 to 10 years and ensuring that our district goals align with our district budget. And I'd like to thank Josh. He sat in on these meetings with us when we met with Amoresco. It's a key part. I can have all the great ideas and fun visions, and Lee can want to do all these things, but it all comes down to the dollars and the cents. So us three have started this and where we're going, and what we don't want to do is we don't want to patch things. We don't want to just throw darts at a dartboard and not have a full plan, and at the same time also get the community and board feedback on it. Because if we don't have the buy-in from the stakeholders in the community and really reaching out and seeing what they classify as needs, then what are we really doing? Because if we're not all in this together, this master facility plan won't go anywhere. And why we need it, again, just to establish that long-term vision. So everybody understands where we're going, we can be fiscal responsible, and allows us to anticipate and plan for the changing needs of enrollment, education, technology, and sustainability. And it goes right along with that first line and that third bullet where it says, plan for the changing needs of enrollment. That's what we're seeing right now. When our preschool has quadrupled and we see our early literacy scores, in my eyes, I love having our kids as young as possible. And I like seeing them in their buildings early. And it maintains compliance with building codes, safety regulations, and accessibility standards. And I always joke with Lee, and I say, that's the boring stuff, Lee. And he just smiles and says, well, too bad. If you want these buildings to run, these are the things we have to do. So, and the last one, and I want to make this very clear to everybody watching and to the board, by building a facilities master plan, it allows for community and stakeholder involvement in the long-term success. So this isn't something that we're looking at from a 2-year window. This is something that we need to strategically plan out and over a course of a decade, and really make sure that we're hitting the needs of our students, community, and staff. And how we're gonna utilize it, again, provides that roadmap for our decision-making, is used when creating the district budget, gives clear directives when making capital improvements to facilities, and is referred to when we request projects, or I go up to Josh's office, for lack of better words, and talk to him. So Josh, you wanna mention anything on this?
Yeah, it's something I've been asking for since I got here. And I think the mindset that people had when I had the discussions, it's almost like I was asking for something that they thought we already currently had. So that's the one thing I will chime in. Dom's correct in saying we haven't had an official one in probably 12 years. And that's what I always pushed back on. They'd give me like a 5-year plan of how the PI money, they expected it to be spent. When I looked at it, it just looked like a damage control plan. Like, we know this roof is gonna go here in 3 years. If we can push it out to 4, we can do this other roof that's gonna go in 2 years. And in my mind, that's no way to plan. And so that's a lot of the, I tended to get a reputation of saying no for certain things. And it was more due to the fact of me pushing back to say, well, what's the plan for the long-term fix instead of doing the damage control? I'm not gonna agree to this if we don't have a long-term outlook to try and fix it. And that's, Dom is the first person that when we sat down and talked about it, first person to really understand what I was trying to say and like talk through what that long-term window looked like. Let's get out in front of this. Let's get to the point to where we are repairing roofs before they're collapsing in and leaking. Like, that is no way to run a district. And so I'm excited to be able to do this, to be able to get out in front of it. I feel like it's gonna be easier for me to say yes to certain things now when it comes to PI spending. The big, don't hold me to that. Just because I'll be able to see the long-term picture and I'll know, okay, my question before was always like, okay, well, what are we gonna go without? Now it's, okay, we are actually getting out in front of it, and this is the long-term plan, not a quick fix, so.
So is that like, so you say provides a roadmap. So right now, we have routes, like the turf is looking bad on the field, so we created a fund. Or we know this was happening, because that's what we were doing before.
I think routes is a generous word.
Okay, alleys.
Eyesores.
But that's exactly what we were doing. Like, we were like doing that when we did the turf and we did the scoreboard. We opened us that fund to try to do it. So now you would have a map
Constant
and have
damage
things on, okay.
Yeah, constant damage control and, to be honest, unrealistic expectations. People coming to me and saying, this is in bad shape, it's gonna be $800,000 and it needs to be done in a year.
You don't get to plan for that.
Yeah, there's no way that can happen. So I would always say, why are we not having this conversation sooner? Why is this not in the long-term plan?
Okay.
And they'd always say it is, but it's really not,
Okay.
because there was no plan.
And with that, what we're gonna go into now is step 1, so where we're at currently. And I didn't want to have a committee, have conversations, bring people to the table to, lack of better words, talk in a circle. And so Lee's gonna start now with where we're at with Amoresco, with the current audit, that's going on in the buildings and go through all of those items, so.
All right, well,
It's all yours. Let me get you a mic too, so make sure they can hear you.
Mr. Kaple just handled 99% of the presentation. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I was asked to stand over here for the camera angle. That's coming our way. So thanks, Josh and Dom. I really appreciate working with both of you. I feel like we've got three good minds together who I think are like-minded in how we want to see the future of the district, and that we don't want to do patchwork, that we want to think beyond the next 5 or 10 years. In having some conversations with Dom about some decisions we could have made that would have made them look really good on the surface, but would have left us high and dry in 10 or 15 years after he and I are gone. So we're trying to be long-term thinkers in how we do things. When I first took the position, I was doing my own audit of all the buildings, and being here for almost a quarter of a century, you know, I've been in a fair amount of buildings to know certain conditions, and you always hear the rumblings and grumblings of the condition or state that some of our buildings are in. And some of it there's truth to, and some of it there's not. So just me being able to take the last 3 or 4 months to kind of conduct my own internal audit, you know, I was able to see and notice some things and bring it to the attention of you know, Josh, Melissa, Dom, and everyone else. With that said, you know, I kind of went to Dom and said, I need help with this because it is vast. When you take a look at all the systems that we'll go through in just a minute, you know, there's a lot of things to consider when doing like a full facilities audit. And it takes someone like an Amoresco who employs engineers and architects and skilled tradesmen to help decipher, like, if we have all these needs, like, which is the greatest need right now? And their goal is to help systematically put like a needs assessment together of like, what do we need to do now? What can we put for year 2, year 3, until we get to where Josh wants to be, is like forward thinking, like instead of doing this deferred maintenance, let's start keeping up and maintaining things and be ahead of schedule rather than behind schedule. So I guess we can skip to the next slide. We're partnering with Amoresco. It is at least the tentative plan, because facilities audits can run from, I just looked online, like $25,000 to $200,000, depending on the depth and scope of what they're looking at. And Amoresco already did part of an audit for us for our energy audit. And so they've done, like, they would estimate 50 to 60% of the work already. So they said it wouldn't take much to do the remainder. So they're going to do that for us for free, in the hopes that, obviously, that they'll score some business along the way. And so I've had a really nice, starting to build a really nice relationship where I feel like I trust Amoresco in some of the decisions that they're gonna help us make. I started to put together a list of things that we need to take into consideration when doing a master facilities plan. And this I provided to Amoresco in a meeting last week to talk about all the different components that we need to look at. And I shared with Kristen earlier that each one of these bullets has like 5 or 6 sub-bullets to it. So big things is the building envelope. So it's like everything on the outside of the building. So it's like the brick and mortar and windows and roof, and how all those systems work together to basically keep the weather out. And then you've got all of your internal building systems, your mechanical, so that's your HVAC, electric, and all those things. Those, in my opinion, not only in this district, but all districts, are not maintained where they need to be because no one ever sees them. They're like down in the bellows, in the tunnels, and you're like, well, we could either do the steps at Welser, or we could upgrade the rotting out boiler system. And everyone's like, well, let's do the steps at Welser. Everyone sees them when they come in, and then the boiler waits another year or 2 or 3, and then it just keeps getting pushed back. So having a systematical way to say, no, the steps aren't going to come first, the boiler needs to come first, is really going to help. And having a third party to help arm wrestle, like with Dom and I, about what's most important, you know, a good third party to have there to determine and organize what is best for the district, I think is going to help everyone. So you can kind of go down through the list, but you see there's like a lot of different things to consider when putting together a facilities audit. This is a sample. They gave us a few different ideas of ways it could be, and this might be one page of an audit where they kind of go and rate things. And then what we can do is we can rate by building or by function, like, well, what's the status of HVAC across the district, or what's the status of HVAC at Roland? And then you could, break it apart, run filters to figure out where our greatest needs are and how we want to spend the money. And then if you go to the next slide, this is just a different graphic. That's good for, community board, people who aren't involved, to say like where maybe our hot points are, and then these little boxes help us determine like what the need is at each individual building. So this is the first step in the process, is to figure out like what needs to be done, and then the second part is involving board and community members to say like, now that we have all of this information, how do we want to use it to make our master facilities plan? So that is the audit part that I just talked about, and it'll come together as a plan with everyone's input. And I think that's all I have.
And what you're looking at up there, these were provided by Amoresco. This is from Ohio Northern University. And so these are all the buildings at Ohio Northern University. And Lee and I really like this picture and could see this for our buildings. Yeah. And it has each one earmarked on how much it would cost, what the deficits are, and then from there is where the planning process. And then real quick, Mr. Fuller, if you can go over kind of the numbering system here and how that works on their needs and how they broke that down.
Yeah, so this is just an example of like a sample of some of the issues. It looks like most of this is related to HVAC. And it looks like they have initials for school buildings, and then with approximate amounts for what it's going to take to fix. And then they prioritized it by need to come up with an ultimate overall score at the end. And we can use those, overall scores to help determine, you might have 5 number 20s at the top of the list, and would you tackle one at each building? Or, it would give us at least an opportunity to dialogue and decide how we want to tackle those projects.
Thank you.
I will just tell you, because I just want to say this. So Crystal asked me, do we have some type of plan to show us in the community how we create things? She just asked this a couple of weeks ago. And my response to her was, with Mr. Fuller's background, it would not surprise me that if he didn't walk into this position handed a folder, he has already started compiling a folder, because that is what he does in his process of dealing with business. I did not say that to you. Yeah. And here you come today and said, I've been in all these buildings and I've already been. So yes, and then I told her that it would be sufficient to have that conversation. And I said if the conversation hadn't been had with him coming to the table, all three of you have already probably come to the table. So I just want you to know how much we do think about what you all are thinking, even though you all don't say it and we haven't said it. She asked that question. Yeah. And so
Thank you.
Here goes that presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Are they able to, Amoresco, are they able to provide us with some data on like the remaining useful life of the systems? So for example, we know if one school has is on year 10 of a 25-year-old roof versus another school that's on year 20 of a 25-year roof.
Yeah, they'll be able to do some of that. Without getting into too much of it, what we can do and what we're going to do in the spring when temperatures rise is an IR scan. And what it does is it uses the thermal temperature from solar energy to warm the roofs, and then all the spots that leak stay warm at night, and then everything else dries out. So they'll do that with core samples to help us determine. I looked at everything that I could find as far as the age of different roofs and when things have been done, and I can't find a good systematical record for any of it. But I think that roof scan, which can be expensive, but I'm working on getting it paid for without our money, will help decide exactly the system and how we want to do the roofs moving forward.
And to that matter, it's next to impossible to try and figure out an age on a roof, because there's been so many patch jobs done that this section of the roof might be 20 years, this section might be 12, this section might be,
Gotcha.
yeah. So I think that's why, for somebody stepping in, I mean, to go, probably, he'd have to look back at each invoice and see which year it was done to then say, and piece it together, and Lord knows how far back it would go.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then just to circle back, on the goals, what we're trying to initially look at. Again, we're evaluating the spaces for our growing preschool program. What Lee didn't mention, I heard all the rumors about Southland needs to be torn down, that it's no longer operable. And, he went over, walked it, was on the roof, doing his whole thing, crawling in the spaces, everything else. And then I got a text saying, we're good. And I said, we're good with what? And he said, set up a meeting with myself and our maintenance team over at the maintenance garage, and we walked it, 4 of us together, and they agreed after walking through it of Southland. And so those spaces for a vision for the preschool, and also really getting back to our love and tradition of the music and arts in this district, and everything I've learned, as I said, about the alumni event that I mentioned last board meeting, to seeing our growing numbers starting to rise at the band and the choral and the orchestra, and our push from Greenview up now on the music. And we gotta update our spaces because our kids deserve it and our staff deserve it. And so they're gonna really look hard at the PAC, and with the help of MT and team, creation of a centralized family welcome center for admissions for Miss Bussey and student services, and having that one-stop shop for parents. You can walk in and have pupil services, have our wraparound services. You can see our preschool and those different items. And then, as I promised him, it's not even a bullet on here, but everything that you just saw on the actual envelope, we'll call it, and all those things. So we're anticipating about 6 to 8 weeks, I think, roughly, from Amoresco. Just for those of you that don't know or may have forgotten, Amoresco, the reason that they had 50 or 60% of this already done is because they're the company that did our air conditioning process. So when he talked about the energy company, that's why. So again, they've been instrumental to us. He's built a strong relationship with them. I think they're on speed dial with Mr. Fuller. And so full steam ahead, and we'll continue to update you after those numbers come in. We're able to see some blueprints, see some pictures, see what our options are. And then what we do is we take those options from our blueprints and from the budget that they prepared. I think they said north or south 10%-ish they're gonna try and get us to. And then we meet with Josh and bring him in on where our PI dollars are. And currently, we have PI dollars tied up in the air conditioning for the next 15 to 20 years. And also, we have other PI dollars currently wrapped up from renovations done in the past. And we have a free budget of PI, which we'll hit on. Then we'll decide from there, do we have enough PI to get these projects done based off this needs assessment, or what are our other options?
So when you said 6 to 8 weeks, that's for Amoresco to actually have a plan laid out so that we can look at it?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And we met with them, I think, a week or two ago, and they're starting the project. So in my head, knowing how these things can go, I'm looking at 6 to 8 weeks from January. Okay. So I'm hoping for end of February, early March at the latest.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
The other part of this is, this allows me to be more, so when I said I'd be more open to spending, this allows me to be more open to that, because of the fact that I've always, not a big fan of TANs. I'm not a big fan of locking up your revenue to do a project, and that revenue is gonna be locked up for 10, 20 years, because that shortens those. When you're constantly in damage control mode, if you're taking away from a large chunk of that to do a renovation here, well, now that's gonna take away from your annual things that you can do. With this long-term plan and taking into effect, like, you know, the roofs, all the things that are typically our damage control things, I'm gonna be more apt to, and that's when we have those conversations, be more apt to say, like, yeah, now I'm open to a TAN. Now let's look at locking up those remaining funds, because it's all encompassing. It's gonna take care of the long-term picture, and it actually allows us to plan better by strategically having those funds placed, instead of, well, we're gonna keep this pocket available because who knows what's gonna happen next year. So,
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Next item we have is Ms. Thompson. Turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. So what I'm sharing with you is the current 24-25 Student Wellness and Success Funds and Disadvantaged Pupil Impact Aid document that we will post on our website. So you know that this year, Mr. Kaple has asked me to focus my work on looking at legislative matters, as well as board policy, including Title IX and such, and compliance. So tonight, I'm excited to be able to share with you, you get a 2-for-1, because this is covering both legislative requirements as well as compliance. Certainly, we're talking about funds, and the Student Wellness and Success Funds and Disadvantaged People Impact Aid. I've worked closely with Josh with regard to the report that you see here, so certainly questions specific to the funds, you can ask Josh, he can go through that with you at a later date. For the purpose of tonight, you'll notice that I've highlighted areas just so that we can move through the document, and I can call out some key areas for your attention. I want to focus really on how the funds are used, in what manner we're using the funds that we receive. And so there are specific initiatives that we're going to go through. Just generally speaking, you'll see that the funds support wraparound services. And so I'll share this with you as a document with a hyperlink so that you can go to those hyperlinks and see the Ohio Revised Code as it relates to these particular areas. But you'll see that the requirements, there are bullet points here listed with regard to how the funds must be spent in terms of 50% on physical and mental health. But also with the development of the plan, there has to be collaboration with community mental health, prevention or treatment provider, our community partners. There is a requirement that we present to the Board of Education, and that's what we're doing this evening. It again will be posted, and you'll find that it will be posted under documents and forms. There is an update, just an annual reporting that we need to do, just to share with you what we're doing, why we're doing. You'll notice in the chart that salaries and benefits for our youth development specialists and Quick Med are coming from these funds. So that's on page 1 here. If you turn to page 2, backside here. What we wanted to do in presenting this information to you, the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce provides this chart that you'll see below with regard to the areas that are allowable for the use of these funds. So I took this chart and recreated it for our purpose. So if you look at the last column, you'll see the areas. So all of the potential areas for funding, the initiatives you'll see that are listed. And then for us, you'll see status of implementation in South Lyndhurst schools. And so you'll notice that because we're using the funds to cover the salaries and benefits for our youth development specialists and Quick Med, clearly because of the mental health and physical health requirements, we are exceeding what that 50% requirement is. And we know that with our YDS team, that they work collaboratively with our school counselors, our school social workers, the student support specialists, student services, our building principals, and that really helps to make up what we call our continuum of services, our wraparound services and support. So you see with the mental health services, the first row there, they're working together to identify student needs and with that team to ensure that students get the mental health services that they need. Physical health services, next highlighted, you'll see is Quick Med. The third thing there is the culturally appropriate prevention services. So this one also has the link and connection to House Bill 123. in our implementation of Erica's Lighthouse, and Sandy Hook. That allows us to not only meet those requirements, but it also fulfills requirements as it relates to the funding and its use as the youth development specialists support the implementation of those curriculum.
Melissa, do they do Erica's Lighthouse presentations with
So they
students?
may do that as a co-presenter with a school social worker, school counselor. They might be available to provide support. All of them have been trained. That was very important for us, that everyone had training in the areas so that sometimes students don't necessarily know to go to their specific school counselor or a school social worker. They may go to the person with whom they have a great relationship and rapport. And so we wanted to ensure that everyone did receive training so that they felt comfortable with the curriculum, the information, and knew how best to direct a student to someone that needed to provide that ongoing or extra support. The next area you'll see homeless services, and so although Ms. Bussey is the homeless liaison that's listed for the district, certainly the youth development specialists support her and providing support to those students and families that are covered by McKinney-Vento. Child welfare involved in services, so those young people that perhaps are involved in foster care system, again, they'll support students. The community liaisons and programming, you'll see they're also helping to identify student needs, making those connections to the resources that a student or family may need. Family engagement, we know that they are available and participate in family engagement activities, and also provide timely feedback and communication regarding parent concerns. Sometimes because of those relationships that they have with students and families, if there is a concern, a staff member, they can too, a staff member could go to them as well, but a family or a student may reach out to one of them, and then they can in turn have conversation with staff, and closing that feedback loop, building principal or Ms. Bussey as needed. So page 4. The things that are listed here, at this point, the youth development specialists, you'll see there are no highlights until we get to the bottom. They're not actively serving in these areas, and you'll see once you read through why that is the case. They're really doing a lot of the wraparound and the social emotional learning support, mental health, behavioral health, and prevention services in that manner. But you do see down at the bottom, dropout prevention. And so certainly we know that they are offering support to students that would be at risk and that have been identified as at risk of dropping out. So we look at page 5, you'll see student safety. Although they are not serving in the capacity of security guards or safety services, again, to start this school year, we trained all of our youth development specialists, student support specialists in the CSTAG model. CSTAG you see is a comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines. It is the model that we use for threat assessment here in the district, K-12. Again, this is consistent with House Bill 123 legislation. And so we wanted to make sure that all staff had this training so that they are in the position to serve on a threat assessment team should the need arise. Finally, you'll go down to the bottom there with community partners. As you know, in our district, we've had for many years wonderful relationships, a host of partners that have worked together with us. And so you'll see that although the requirement is for 2, we certainly exceed 2 partners. So, certainly our work with the Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services, the Mental Health Board, the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio, our host of community-based partners, and you know that you are always willing to approve those service agreements that would refer to those community-based partners that we're able to bring in to provide those mental health services, our nonprofit organizations, and then the collaboration that we have with hospital systems, particularly University Hospital. So you'll see at the bottom the data and evaluation this year, and for the past several years, we've had more of a decentralized model, so a lot of the data that is maintained in determining the success, the implementation that's occurring at the building level, that data is at the building level, but you'll note here that we're wanting to look again at so that we can work on addressing those. And then finally, the most important highlight at the bottom is that we are in compliance. And so I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to you to let you know that together with Josh, we make sure that this report is completed on time. Annually, everything is submitted. And so we are in good standing with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. And that concludes this presentation. Again, you got 2 for 1, compliance and legislation. So do you have any questions with regard to any of this?
How many YDSs do we have in the district, Ms. Thompson? I know I just can't remember the number, I'm sorry.
So there are 6. We've got student support specialists as well. And so YDS are paid out of this particular fund.
Okay. Do the SSSs get the same type of training as the YDS?
Yes.
The difference is just that the funding is coming out of 2 different pots?
Yes.
Yep, and you're looking at Title I for the SSSs.
I think there's a slight difference in the job descriptions too, but yeah,
So if
it's
Title
similar
I is
training.
SSS,
Yeah.
Brush and Sunview don't have SSSs, is that my right? They don't get Title I funds, right?
They don't get title.
So that means Brush and Sunview don't have SSSs if they don't get Title I funds?
Correct.
7.
So that means we have 6 YDSs and how many SSSs?
7?
7,
Is that
she
what you're
said?
saying?
Okay. So,
No, I'm,
No.
that was the message I got from
Oh,
Well, right, but there is either an SSS or YDS at every building. Brush is different in that there are 4 that are located here.
there are 4 YDSs located here.
That is correct.
And so then the other schools, there are 2 that rotate between 4 other schools?
There is an SSS that could be at those schools, but they serve a similar function.
But do the YDSs see the elementary schools and the other ones? And the only reason I ask that is because yes, Brush is great, and yes, Brush does need this, but we are seeing where it's happening at a younger age now, and these issues are at younger ages. I am aware what SSSs do, but from my knowledge and looking at what our job descriptions and trying to remember, there is somewhat of a difference there, and there's somewhat of a different support and qualification.
So with the decentralized model, where they did visit other buildings, when we added the student support specialists, what it did is it allowed for there to be an FTE that serves the role and function of general youth development and student support at each school. So they may not necessarily be YDS by title. However, they serve in a similar capacity.
We'll talk more.
We will.
Okay. I just had questions, so that's cool. All right.
Yes, but every building has someone to provide support and
Support.
service.
But is it just, okay, go, okay.
Okay?
Nice work.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you.
What she didn't mention too, on the compliance piece, it's becoming, and Ms. Falkenberg, as you know, with all of our legal updates, at the board meetings, it's a monster.
Yeah.
Everything, she did our own audit, and we have a spreadsheet now of everything we have to be in compliance for, and who's in charge of that compliance, and then she circles back to them and ensures that those are taken care of, and it's lengthy, it's a lot, so I appreciate all the work, Ms. Thompson.
Yes, indeed.
Wow.
And the last piece for tonight, on our end, is the handbook update. This will be, extremely brief. What I wanted to do, especially for those tuning in or watching this at a later date, if you remember, a couple months ago, in the fall, we as a school board, superintendent, assistant superintendent, and treasurer, we sat down with the ESC and went through and did a work session on what we want our goals to be what we see as our governing rules, as a board, how we wanna operate, how they want me to communicate to them. We have new, board members, obviously I'm new, and really just solidify, our roles and responsibilities. And that work session went very well. We have a follow-up meeting, coming in January, and I just wanted to share, what we've been working on, in between there. So what we've been doing is the board, has been looking at goals and governing rules, that will become our norms. And also looking at putting together a handbook, playbook, whatever you wanna call it. So when we do have new board members come in, or when Josh and I have a question, or however that might look, that we have our guiding principles. And all that does is allow us to stay consistent, stay in compliance, and continue on the positive path that we have going on. I don't want, again, I've said it ad nauseum, nothing was going wrong, inside the board absolutely at all. But at the same time, if we don't continue to improve ourselves, improve what we're doing, and really look at that long-term lens of things, then we're just sitting in status quo, and I know this board isn't like that. And so ESC, Russ Bennett is coming back in January. We're gonna discuss the goals that the board has laid out, and really look to put together a handbook that will be visible. It's nothing we hide, no games, no tricks. It'll be visible on the website, and just something that we're really excited about as we continue to enhance. And again, going back to what Mr. Fuller presented on today, what MT's looking at strategically on compliance and everything in between, is that we have to look at everything with a forward lens and also a long-term lens, and to make sure that that this district stays sustainable and that we're doing everything we can for our stakeholders and the kids. So, anything you wanted to add?
Anything more? So, it's my understanding they have to be in the choir thing at 6:30?
Yep.
The video of?
Yeah, we got a lot going on. We have St. Ed's down in the
Yes,
gym.
St.
We have
Ed's
the
at the
choir going
gym.
on, so.
Okay.
Choir. in the
So
gym.
I realized that, there's not a session for board business at the work session. So in essence, we can't really discuss those things, am I right?
I mean, it's your work session. We just have to plan better to put a topic on the agenda.
Yeah, put a topic on it.
Well, even if we had a topic, they gotta go.
Well, yeah.
Well, we didn't need them. That's us being video is
It still has to be,
us being video
It's not
is
a
just so people can see the meeting. So it's what's the word I'm trying to use without saying it the wrong way, Josh?
It's not a requirement.
Thank you. It is not a requirement for us to air our board meetings. We do it as a courtesy to our community, because we have meetings that are earlier than the average board meetings, and just so our community can know what's going on.
so it's nothing wrong if they cut this off
No,
right
there's
now and we
nothing wrong
keep-
if they cut the video.
I mean,
We are
is
still in the
that-
meeting.
No, because I still take the minutes. The minutes are what is
Yes,
the
the meetings are
requirement.
what
Okay,
counts.
so I just wanna make sure we get them out. So if you
Yeah.
wanna let them go, I mean, I don't know, the inconsistency for me is scary.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it kind of in twofold, to be honest with you. If it's something that can wait,
So I guess
We
that's
can
the
wait.
question, because we could put it on next week at the end, because we need to discuss,
You wouldn't even have to put it on, because that's part of
That's a
the
part of
section
the
at the
section,
end. You've
yeah,
got
board
board
business.
business.
Yeah,
Okay.
board business. You got
Well,
the
I just
different
want to be,
sections.
because Ashley has to leave.
Yeah.
So we want to deal with we need to go in executive session next week, because we got to finalize the things for Josh and Dom. Then if we want to do in board business, we can deal with 2025 council meeting times, board meeting times, the slate for next year, some things that the other board members are thinking about doing next year, and then talk about where you guys stand officially. Do we want to just do that in other board business next week? Is everybody gonna be here next week?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and then
We can also, for those of us that got blanked by our name and have their laptops today,
I did mine.
I got my laptop today
4:30
too, so I'm gonna believe that.
today.
If we want to finalize that,
Oh,
and then
yeah,
we can also
yep.
come up with a date for Russ to come, we can throw out a few dates and you can tell us.
Yeah,
if we already picked it.
I think we have that date.
We have that day for Russ.
Solidified.
It's that meeting. Our business meeting is what, the 6th, Josh?
Yes.
And so that following week is the week because
Okay.
it's
It's the
switches.
work session.
So it's the work session.
All right, so we can have all that done, we can fine tune whatever we have next week. So I guess we'll just kind of plan, because I ain't gonna say it's gonna be 9 o'clock, but we probably will be here 8:30 if we get all that stuff done and be ready to roll into the new
I
year.
can't stay to 8:30, but I will give you all the time that I can.
Okay. And wherever we stop, then if you got leftover stuff,
I
just
actually
leave it.
I just might come late. I just come late.
Okay,
Yeah, I just come late. Because we need what the business at the end of the meeting.
yeah, we'll
So
do
I
it in
just makes more
order.
sense to come late.
Okay, we'll do it that way then. Okay.
Go with that.
We don't have a need for executive session, and 6:23, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Kathryn and Shelby, all in favor? All right, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, thank you.
You are welcome.
And I tried to go onto the.